Wow, wow, wow. I have been waiting for that conversation for a long time. For a long time. Dr. Bernstein is like music to my ears. This whole idea of us being well just by using a ketogenic diet is remarkable. And, I feel like I've known this stuff for years and trying to shake people with this information. But anyway, he's brought it to a whole nother level, and he has a beautiful story about his family and how he's helping to heal them. It's
Yeah,
really
real warrior parent stuff. And I love how he's kind of simplifying this idea of, first of all, how it's all related, what you're eating, what you're doing on your phone, what your, medications you're taking, the exercise, everything, and making it doable so that for those of us who just don't necessarily understand all the science of it, we know we have some steps we can take to feel better and help our kids feel better.
Love it. You're going to love this one.
The world is a lot right now. Are you feeling it? We all need new tools to help us walk through the chaos with grace, ease, and compassion for each other and for ourselves. In this podcast, you'll hear from parents, educators, and other experts who can bring perspective to the monumental job of parenting. It's time to level up and be warriors for our kids and our communities. This is the Warrior Parent Podcast. I'm Marci Mitchell.
And I'm Debbie DiManno. As parents, we understand that it really does take a village to raise our kids. We hope that this podcast serves to create and support that community for you. Join us as we discuss and practice our core tools, which are proven mind-body techniques that can be used by anyone to improve your life on a daily basis.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Warrior Parent Podcast. We are really grateful you're joining us today. Today, we are speaking with Dr. Matt Bernstein, who is a respected clinical psychiatrist for more than 20 years and a Cour's chief executive officer and one of the leading voices in the emerging field of metabolic psychiatry. After graduating summa cum laude from Columbia University in New York, with a bachelor's degree in English literature, he received his medical degree from Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Dr. Bernstein then trained at the MGH McLean Psychiatry Residency Program in Belmont, Massachusetts, where he served as chief resident. He remained at McLean Hospital after residency as psychiatrist in charge and later served as assistant medical director of its schizophrenia and bipolar inpatient program. Dr. Bernstein has developed his passion for community-based care as the chief medical officer at Eldhorn, a sister program of Cour, where he's pursued alternative ways such as focus on metabolism, nutrition, circadian rhythm biology, and exercise and brain function to help individuals achieve their best level of functioning without relying solely on traditional psychiatric approaches. In addition to serving on the clinical advisory board at Metabolic Mind, Dr. Bernstein is known for organizing the first ever public conference on metabolic psychiatry in 2023. And so there's so much rich content and there's so much to learn about. We're really grateful. Thank you for being here, Dr. Bernstein.
Thanks so much for inviting me. Really glad to be with you.
Wow, wow, wow. So I can't even tell you how excited I am about this conversation.
This is right up Debbie's alley.
Wow. She says I'm always the sciencey one. So my background is exercise physiology, number one. And I'm a mom, of course, but and I've worked in the medical field for almost 30 years. So but it wasn't around psychiatry by any stretch of the imagination. But my goodness, like I kept we get these messages like, oh, Dr. Bernstein, wants to be on your podcast. And we're like, like, I wonder what a metabolic psychiatrist wants to talk to some warrior parent moms about. And then I spent probably 3 or 4 hours with all the work with some other podcasts that you've done. And now it all makes sense to me. So go ahead and start sharing your amazing background and how you went from psychiatry and then had a shift into metabolic psychiatry and what that is.
Great. Yeah, I'm happy to share. I love the name of your podcast, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it sort of makes me tear up a little bit because I see myself and my wife as well. We're warrior parents too.
Absolutely.
Yes.
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 I was a traditional psychiatrist, open-minded, well-trained at these institutions up
Absolutely.
until about 7 years ago when two of our three kids got very sick. And it was something
Mhm.
that the medical system could not figure out how to help us, despite us being well-resourced and
Mhm.
knowing good people and getting them in front of the best people. And it looked
Yeah.
very mental health to start. But once
Yeah.
Mhm.
we were digging further, we realized there was all of these physical things going on as well. And it really challenged me because it really made me realize how, my field of psychiatry sort of divides the world into, mind or brain versus the rest of the body. And we don't think
Yeah.
about the rest of
Mhm.
the body much. And it's a real
Yes.
problem. And what our kids ended up having was a very systemic illness, an autoimmune encephalitis, meaning the immune system was attacking parts of their brain,
Yeah.
set off by infections that needed to be treated and toxins that needed to be cleared. And nutrition was a huge part of their healing process as well. And
Mhm.
it really opened my mind, quite a bit. And then, fast forward to, during part of that journey, I learned about the idea of a specific diet being incredibly helpful for brain health called the ketogenic diet. I
Yes.
Mhm.
learned this. I was sitting in a Grand Rounds lecture at McLean listening to Dr. Chris Palmer, who I highly recommend your listeners look up and possibly get his book. It really explains this very well, this connection between metabolic health and brain health. And these things are not only connected, they're bidirectional, and they're really, brain health is a representation of metabolic health in many ways.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yes.
the most powerful thing we can do for our metabolic health is food. In particular, the ketogenic diet really heals a broken metabolism,
Yeah.
um, and
Mm.
exercise and
Yeah.
mindfulness and
Yeah.
being in line with circadian rhythms. And so I started
Yeah.
learning all about these things and started applying it in my
Yeah.
clients, my patients, and I've been blown away by how incredibly
Yeah.
helpful it is.
I
That's
wanted to
amazing.
to share with you a little bit of what happened to me. So in my 40s, I had a giant crash. Of course, I'm working the medical thing, working 80 hours a week, I essentially crashed. Same thing sort of that happened to your kids. So I developed an autoimmune disorder, and it was Lyme, it was the co-infections, it was the brain fog. I couldn't walk. I was in a wheelchair. And so a lot of the treatments that you described, so hyperbaric. So I was in a hyperbaric chamber for 2 months, every week for 2 months, IV antibiotics. And so I was for the process, I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker because of all the die-offs. So that's when I discovered the alternative stuff, because without that, I was just filling myself up with more toxins without the release of that. But this was 15 years ago. And so there was, I was going to what were called quacks at the time
Mhm.
to try and get better. But there wasn't a lot around nutrition. It was just like, oh, just eat healthy, which I kind of did anyway. So that didn't seem like such a thing. But I really, really now understand the process of ketosis and autophagy. And I really would like you to describe for our audience what happens with ketosis, what happens to the brain with ketosis.
Absolutely. Great introduction. So I'm trying to think of how to get into it, but so we can produce ketones. Our body makes them essentially, and if
Yeah.
we eat a diet and with a specific ratio of macronutrients, our body will generate these compounds called ketones. And
Yeah.
ketones are multiple things. They are an alternative source of fuel for the brain. So the brain generally runs on glucose, but
Yeah.
sometimes no matter how much glucose we have floating around in our blood, our brain is still starving for energy because of this thing called
Mm.
insulin resistance. We don't have to get into all of
Yes.
that, but we
Yes.
need that alternative source of fuel. It's like taking a car that's just a gas car and take it in the shop and turn it into a hybrid car. Now we've got two different sources of fuel for the brain.
Yes.
So one very powerful mechanism, but the other mechanisms are that ketones are also a signaling molecule, and they're telling our cells to do certain things. One of the things it tells our cells to do is to make more mitochondria and healthier mitochondria, to recycle them,
Yep.
essentially, to break down the ones that aren't working for parts and essentially make new ones that are working better, and just to make more of them. And mitochondria
Yeah.
are the energy factories for the cell. They're making ATP, but they
Yep.
do much, much more than that. They are also
Yes.
involved in releasing neurotransmitters in neurons, and they're involved in the step of synthesizing hormones, which, are so powerful for our overall health and for our brain health. And they're involved in actually the expression of genes in the nucleus of the cell.
Yeah.
So many good things that are happening from those ketones. We also know that
Yeah.
ketones reduce inflammation in the brain, which is a huge part of mental health struggles.
Right.
And the way we live in our society these days, inflammation is rampant. We also know that it increases something called brain-derived neurotropic factor, which causes the brain cells to make more connections with each other. There's so
Yep.
many mechanisms. I could keep talking and talking, but
No.
the idea is that we know so much about how ketones work in the brain because
Yeah.
neuroscientists have been studying them intensively for the last
Yes.
30 years
Because
we
of
know,
epilepsy,
right,
right?
we know the ketogenic
Yes.
diet has worked for epilepsy for over 100 years. And so we've been
Whoa.
trying to figure out why that works. And so we have
Yeah.
incredible amounts of science. And what I
Right.
like to say is we have more science about how ketones improve brain health than I do about any psychiatric medication improving brain health.
Yeah.
That I would never have said that 10 years ago when I was.
No,
Wow.
I'm sure you wouldn't, because
But
I couldn't
Yeah.
find anybody to have that
Mm.
conversation with.
right.
Yes.
I am the least sciencey in the room. And so coming like I'm the lay person in this, from my perspective, I hear the ketogenic diet and I'm hearing, it's been all over news. It's how to lose fat, and you can't, it feels very restrictive and it's not, I've never heard the connection with brain health. And I have kids who've had a lot of mental health issues. So that's really interesting to know. And my thought goes to is like, how am I going to get my kids to eat this way? And how am I going to maybe get myself to eat this way? And so can you talk about that? Because my perception is that it's very rigid and very difficult. And I don't know if I hope I'm wrong.
Well, it depends on your perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if your perspective is, I have this terrible condition, and right now I'm being
Right.
told I need to take, 3 or 4 different medications with awful side effects, and I feel awful, and I'm still suffering anyway, despite the medications.
Yeah. Good point.
Then it doesn't feel very restrictive at all. It feels like, oh, all I have to do is eat these things, and I'm going to
Yeah.
feel better, and I don't have to be on these medications for the rest of my life. I think, that's a
Yes.
really important perspective to have.
Yeah.
What are you comparing it to? And if your only goal is, I want to look better, in my bathing suit, it is a way to lose weight, but,
Yeah.
it might feel like a restrictive way to lose weight. And so I totally understand that perspective as
Yeah.
well. So
But
Yeah.
so much more, right?
yeah,
Yeah. It's the
food is so
more
much
that
more
is
for
so
your health,
interesting.
right? I mean, it
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
allow for weight loss, but we're talking about the brain health benefits. We're talking about reversing insulin resistance. The ketogenic diet reverses type 2 diabetes. There are now multiple studies showing that it reverses type 2
Wow.
diabetes. And yet, if you get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and you go see an endocrinologist, they don't say that to people. They say,
No, they
take
don't.
this medication, and then eventually you'll need another medication and another medication. And oh yeah, if you want to work on diet, you can eat, complex carbohydrates instead of sugar, but that's not going to reverse diabetes. Essentially diabetes is carbohydrate intolerance, and we're still telling people to eat carbohydrates.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. But yes, you have to reduce and really almost eliminate most carbohydrates in a ketogenic diet. And for a lot of people, that's going to sound, wow, that's hard. And at first it does sound hard. You're going to stop eating sugar. You're going to stop eating most breads and pasta and rice and potatoes and even sweet potatoes and all of these things that people feel like are staples of our diet, and we've told need to be staples of our diet. So that's very, very different than how we're used to eating.
Yeah.
Right.
But it can be absolutely delicious and nourishing and filling.
Yeah.
And we have a program where we have a chef that's cooking absolutely world-class meals that are ketogenic, that are super tasty. And it's actually it's just different. It's a different way of eating. It's a different way of looking at food. Food is your nourishment, it's your medicine, as opposed to it's my comfort, and it's going to be a pleasure always. And eventually, after a period of usually a couple months, people say, I don't miss the carbohydrates, I don't miss the sugar at all, I feel just fine about it.
Because your body's not craving it anymore either. It's not looking for it, right? Because my husband, like, every January does a ketogenic diet. It's a dry January here, so we're not that much fun right now. but he has really severe ADHD, and he will be like, "Oh my God!" Like I wake up at 4 o'clock, and my computer's like, like everything's just making sense for him. It's no longer scrambled, you know. I mean, he does take medication, but he said at that point he feels like he wouldn't even need the medication, right?
That's
Like it everything is just lining up for him so clearly. And then, you know, Marci and I are big spiritual people, so we talk a lot about the connection between brain, you know, and heart and belly, right? And gut instincts and all those sort of things. And autophagy does an amazing job clearing up your gut health as well. And those things are directly connected, right?
Hey, we just wanted to take a quick moment to tell you about something very exciting that Debbie and I and our team have been working on for literally years. And that is our Cour Tools app, which is now available at the Google Play Store and at the Apple Store. And you can sign up for it now, and you will get access to all the tools we've been talking about on the podcast.
And if you're an early adopter of Cour Tools, you can get a VIP price for $49 for a lifetime. That's
Lifetime.
right.
Buy it once, and we'll keep updating it too.
Yes. So we're super excited about this. Go to Apple Store, go to Google Play, and purchase it now.
Cour Tools, COUR, capital TOOLS.
Go get it.
The brain and the gut are intimately connected. There's the microbiome gut-brain axis where we see a bidirectional communication between what's going on in the gut and the brain, and it's mediated by all those microbes in our gut as well. They're very involved in that.
Yeah.
And yeah, something like ADHD, the ketogenic diet, it's, you know, that's easy. ADHD is, you know, falls down, you know, almost immediately. We're using ketogenic diets for really severe conditions: bipolar disorder with psychotic features, severe major depression with suicidality, schizophrenia. We're seeing benefits in these very severe conditions. And so if it can treat that, and epilepsy, you know, your garden variety ADHD or anxiety, social anxiety, you know, you may not need to do the full ketogenic diet. You might just need to clean up your diet, lower carbohydrate, exercise, do a program that doesn't even need to make any kind of high level of ketones. So the full version is what we're talking about, is that's for people with, you know, a more severe condition. But for people with a less severe condition, it's not necessary to do necessarily the full version of a ketogenic diet. A clean diet that's lower in carbohydrate with some exercise and some mindfulness and circadian rhythms could, you know, solve it right there.
That sounds good.
Yeah, because, you know, from a nutritional perspective, it's, you know, it's you can have, you know, lots of berries, right? Berries do not spike your insulin. So people are like, oh, well, how can we eat without fruit and vegetables? Well, it's just not true. There's, you know, all kinds of salads and greens and nuts and seeds, and like it's really a full diet nutritionally wise. You're really not missing anything.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I advocate a version of the ketogenic diet that's omnivore. So ideally, someone's eating animal proteins and then using a lot of vegetables, non-starchy vegetables, as you said, nuts, seeds, healthy fats are a big part of this. So because most of the diet ends up becoming from fat, we really have to pay attention to the healthy fats. And there is controversy in the nutrition world about what constitutes a healthy fat, but pretty much everyone knows that monounsaturated fats are very healthy. So in particular, things like extra virgin olive oil, the oil from avocados and nuts, that's all monounsaturated fats, or mostly, and that's very healthy. In everyone's book, people then diverge and say, well, they want people to eat polyunsaturated fats. Well, I think that that's actually problematic, and you need to avoid saturated fat, which I think also is not correct. I think there's now a lot of data exonerating saturated fats, have their health benefits, and that they can be used in a healthy version of a diet. So there are controversies out there, but people can adapt this to their own way of eating and their own needs, as long as it's clean, as long as you're not eating processed foods, you're not eating sugar, You're not
Yeah.
eating the high starchy carbohydrates. There's ways to do a ketogenic diet that's vegetarian. Even though, like I said, I think there are benefits of using animal foods, but some people don't want to, and we can make a vegetarian ketogenic diet. I even have someone
Hmm.
I know who does a vegan ketogenic diet, which is even harder to do, but it's
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be tough. That'd be
Yeah,
tough.
I know my cousin is vegetarian. I know she's done keto very successfully. So, hmm.
So, Marcy and I a lot about, whole health. So, talk about, like, you talked about circadian rhythms and how important sleep is. Obviously, sleep is the only time your body gets a
Mm,
chance to heal, right? Exercise, like, what's the right amount of exercise for people who maybe just have mild issues, right?
Well, yeah, I think everyone's program needs to be individualized depending on what kind of problem they're trying to solve and also what their starting point is. We
Yeah.
don't
mhm.
throw people into an intensive exercise regimen someone who hasn't exercised in years. That wouldn't be
Right.
wise. Someone's going to go out and injure themselves. But any amount, if you're starting from nothing, any amount is a huge benefit. That's actually where you get the most
Yeah.
benefit, is going from nothing to even just, let's say, walking 3 or 4
Yes.
times a week for 30 minutes. Huge benefits from going from nothing to that. You actually get the most
Yeah.
Yeah.
benefits. But then from there, I'd like to see people progress and eventually get into doing a little bit of strength training, maybe
Hmm.
some high intensity training if they're able
Yeah.
to in some way. We get a lot of extra benefits by those additional types of exercise. And, circadian rhythms and sleep are hugely powerful as well.
Yeah.
We know there's incredible data on sleep and physical health and mental health, and
Hmm.
incredible data on circadian rhythm disruption and physical and mental health as well.
Mm,
Ideally, I like to have people get up in the morning and first thing is go out and see the sun, because that sets
Yeah.
your circadian clock for the day. Is you get the
Yes.
sunlight in the eyes, the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain, registers that, and it's
mm,
sort of the master orchestrator of our circadian clock, which gets our
Yes.
hormones in alignment and it gets our sleep schedule in alignment, and everything works better in the body if our circadian rhythm is attuned like that. So ideally, we
mhm.
at about the same time every day, see the sun, get out and see the sun again at a certain point in the day, at least once, maybe twice,
Right.
because the sun
Right.
again will set our clock. Our eyes can tell the difference between 8 a.m. sun and noon sun, and that's helping set
Mm,
our clock for the day. So essentially,
Yeah.
you think about your circadian clock as it's if you have a grandfather clock in your house, but you need to go around all day and kind of make sure it's set to the right time or it'll get off time. And the way we
Yeah.
set it is by waking up at the same time, seeing the sun, eating at the same times, and going to bed at around the same time. And finally,
mhm.
the hardest thing to do for everyone, for me included, is eliminate blue light for an hour or two before bed. And that is a very, very
Amen.
hard thing to do in our culture. There I have some
Amen.
tricks and ways to do that, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
it requires some commitment and some effort to do that.
Yeah.
So even if
And keep
people
the
aren't doing that part, if they're doing
y-
the other parts, they're going to get some benefit.
yeah, keep the phone out of your bedroom, right?
Yeah, but even the bright LED lights have a lot of blue light in them. And
Yes.
so you really have to
Mm,
get a version of light in your house that's either has a red hue. Now have bulbs that you can adjust,
Yeah.
that will adjust. And you can actually turn your phone to a true red light mode. The regular modes that they put on there about like night shift isn't enough, but there are ways
Um,
to get a real red light mode on your phone. There are some
really? Hmm.
ways to do this. But it's the hardest one for all of us. I mean, putting
yeah.
that
Yeah.
phone down, putting
Right.
the lights down, and not being stimulated for an hour or two by all this bright blue light. It's
Yeah.
Yes. For
hard
the
for us
last
to
20
do.
years, right? Because it
Yeah.
wasn't a problem before that, but
But we've all gotten used to it, and kids have grown up
totally.
this way. So to take it
Yes.
away is also very hard for children. Really hard.
Mm-hmm. It sure is. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about your new program, right? So this
Yeah.
is brand spanking new. This is hot off the press, right? You're starting a new program this summer. Is
No,
that
we
correct?
we started it in the summer of
Last summer.
2024. Yeah, yeah, we opened
Okay.
July
Okay.
of 24.
Okay.
So it's brand new in terms of the world of psychiatry, because this whole idea of thinking this way is very new. Um,
Yes.
and there are not that many mental health clinicians doing it. There are a few
Mm,
studies that have come out, but now a lot of research going on currently. So there's going to be a lot more research studies coming out in the next couple of years. But in my view, I don't think we need to wait for more research studies. I think there's enough research to show that
Yeah.
this is helpful and people who want to do it. But it's a lot of changes for people to make all on their own. And what I found with
Yeah.
Right.
outpatients is that some people are really motivated, they're really organized, and they can make a lot of these changes on their own. But a lot of people
Yeah.
need support and help to make all these changes.
Yes.
So we
Yeah.
created this program that's an immersive program where people can come and stay with us and learn how to eat this way, cook this way, exercise, get on their right circadian clock, learn some mindfulness activities that work for them, and do the whole program all at once and really just immerse themselves in this new way of living. And
Yeah.
then they can learn how to keep going and do that when they get home. The idea is that they'll continue to do all those things when they get home. And so
Yeah, that sounds
especially for
super helpful.
people, struggling with a mental health condition, it can feel very overwhelming, all the stuff that I'm saying,
Yeah.
and there's a lot more to it than this. So,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
this is the idea. Yeah.
How long is the program?
So it's a minimum of a month, and then sometimes people are
Wow.
2 months or even 3 months to sort of fully wrap their minds around, being able to do it when they get home.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That
And
sounds, I mean, it sounds like a long time, and yet I think part of that is just that we have this mindset of, oh, that's going to be expensive, and versus like your lifetime of bad habits, like to think you're going to just flip them.
Right.
So something that really a month feels like a really good amount of time to reprogram. I mean, that sounds actually lovely.
Yeah.
yeah.
It takes at least a month to build a new habit. That there's a lot of
Yeah.
science behind that. And so that's partly why with the month minimum that you
Hmm.
Yeah.
can't make new habits quicker than that. And we really see
Yeah,
it's an investment in your overall health for
exactly.
the rest of your life. So yes,
Exactly.
it is expensive, and I wish I could make this more affordable. The goal is to eventually make this much more affordable for people.
Yes.
We can, scale it up to some extent, but for now it's expensive. But I do, that's partly how we talk to people about it, is that this is an investment in your health now, but also your health 10 years from now, 20 years from now. You learn those
Exactly.
habits, you're not going to develop these chronic health conditions. You're going to,
Yeah.
throughout the rest of your life.
Well, and let's just say that, the U.S. Government, I'll get on my bandwagon here, has not helped us with this situation. I don't know if you saw, but just today, the FDA banned red dye after all these years and
Wow.
all that we've known. We've known this for how many years? I mean, in California, they just banned it here amongst a whole bunch of other things. But that one thing, people jumping up and down, screaming like this stuff is killing us, right? And so I think I'm hopeful that finally um people have been shaken enough and people are sick enough that people are going to be on your bandwagon, right? And
Yeah.
people they're just tired of feeling bad, and most people I feel don't know, they don't know what it feels like to feel good in their
That's
body, right? They have no concept. They've been feeling bad for so long, right? That they don't
Yeah.
know the difference. And especially for people who have mental health issues, right? It's
Yeah.
really hard to work yourself out of or tool yourself out of that, depression or whatever you've been feeling, because you don't know there is anything but a pill.
It's
Like,
right.
You know, it makes me think of Germany also. I was stationed over there in the 90s, and I remember learning that in Germany, and I don't know if it's still the case, but back then, if somebody went to the doctor and they were not feeling well or they were stressed, whatever, they could be prescribed a week at or 2 weeks at a spa, the Bodens. And that was part of their healthcare system. And people would go there and it wasn't like, oh, we can't afford this, this is too much. It was like, oh, you need this. You're going to go spend 2 weeks at this spa. And it was covered. They weren't paying for it. And it was just a normal part of taking care of the whole person. And so a lot of this is paradigm adjustment for us that this is a normal thing to do, to go somewhere for a month and really reset and take care and learn how to do better. And then to make that, like you say, to make that something for every person, so,
That's
so
right.
that it is. I don't even like the word affordable. Like it's just something we do. Like this is a normal part of caring for a human being.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with that. And
Mm,
it used to be true in America too. There used to be all kinds of clinics around that
yes.
were involved with food, and they had fasting clinics. And
Mm,
fasting causes autophagy as well, and it causes
Mhm.
ketosis.
Mm-hmm.
And they could reverse all kinds of conditions. But these
Yeah.
conditions were also not as prevalent. There weren't,
Right.
there used to be, diabetes used to be 1-2% of the population, 50 years ago. Now it's over 11%
Yeah.
of type 2 diabetes.
Mm,
And our
yeah.
paradigm of medicine, it's incredibly powerful. Pills, surgeries, diagnostics. If
Mm-hmm.
you have a bad infection or a bad injury or a heart attack, you want to be in a high-tech hospital getting all of those things. But
Mm-hmm.
our paradigm of medicine does not do a good job of preventing illness or treating these
No,
chronic conditions, and it doesn't do
no.
Yes.
a good job at treating mental health. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say that even as a practicing
Yeah.
psychiatrist,
Yeah.
proud psychiatrist, but I don't think
Right.
we've done a good job of
Yeah.
reversing these chronic conditions. We just have
Yeah.
Yeah.
pills that reduce symptoms and cause a lot of side effects. We're talking about getting at the root causes that actually can reverse and prevent all of these bad things from happening. And it does
Yeah.
take a lot more work. It is a different paradigm shift. You can't just go
Exactly.
in and say, you can't just take a pill or 2 pills or 3 pills. There's a lot more effort involved, but it's really, really worth it.
And I
Yeah.
love that you point out that it used to be like that. So when people say, "Oh, we can't do it, too expensive," we can't. No, we can. We have.
Absolutely.
And it's just, what do we value? Where do we put our emphasis? If this is what we decide is important, then absolutely we can do it. This is America. This is
Right.
Yeah.
2025, richest nation in the world. We have so much innovation. We have so much knowledge. We just have to decide that this is what matters to us. And we can move
Yeah.
mountains if that's what we decide.
That's absolutely right. I mean, think about how
Yeah.
much money people are spending on these GLP-1 drugs,
Yeah.
Yeah.
something like, 10, $11,000, a year
Right.
for the rest
Yep.
of people's lives. I mean,
Yes.
literally, right? Or even
Yeah.
more. I mean, I think they're like, $1,200 a month. So even
Yeah.
more, per year. And then this is, people need to stay on these medications for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
We will
Keep it
go
up.
bankrupt. I mean, actually, so, eating the right way, exercise, taking the time, improving our food supply, it's dirt cheap compared to what we're
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
to try to solve those problems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think so much of it is just education, right? And so like, Marci and I back in the day before COVID, we would do these live workshops. And so I would get up and do the nutrition and exercise and
Right.
sleep hygiene, that whole thing. And there at one point, so I grew up on a farm in the Midwest, and so I saw the spraying of the food. My dad would come in just covered in pesticides and smell. It was in my well water, which is probably how I got so sick. And so there were individuals, parents, when I'm telling them the stuff about how the our food is poisoned. It is laced with poison. The seeds are poison. The herbicides are built into the seeds that we plant, like,
Right.
right? Even if you didn't spray them, it's still in the seed. And people would get up and walk out. Oh yeah, like flip me off, and I don't want to hear what you have to say. The FDA has my back. And I'm like, no, they don't.
That's
No, they don't. And so here we are, I think people are finally starting to understand what has the paradigm that has happened. But I think so many people just feel hopeless, just hopeless in their situation around their weight. People are 100, 200 pounds overweight. Like, where do I start? Like, where do I start? Right.
yeah.
And the same thing, with your situation. I can't imagine being in your position where like, okay, so try this medicine. Oh, that one's not working. Okay, we'll come back in another month. Let's try another one. Or let's add this one to the last one. Like, that's crazy making, right? But now to feel like you're empowering people with their own lives and their own mental wellness and their own health must feel amazing for you.
It
Yeah.
does. Yeah, when people, listen and do the process, if they take it to heart, it's hard at first, as we were saying, like
Yeah.
this is a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
But if they do it and they start getting the benefits, it's incredibly empowering for people,
Oh yeah.
putting their health back in their hands. And
Yes.
Nice.
if someone's motivated enough, they don't need a program like mine. I mean, we're talking about
No.
interventions that someone can do on their own. Now, I don't want to make it very clear. I don't want people with a severe mental illness to
Right.
make a bunch of changes with their medication without
Right.
talking with their doctor,
Right.
or even changing their
Right.
diet without talking to their doctor, and just getting that cleared. But if someone doesn't have a severe mental illness, we're talking about someone who's just feels low energy and some brain fog and just kind of feels crummy, they absolutely can do this on their own, and they will
Yes.
get benefits.
Yeah.
So I think we're talking about, are you doing this, for vitality and for overall health, or are you doing this because you're trying to reverse a severe condition? If you've got a severe
Yeah.
condition that you're trying to reverse, you do have to work with professionals.
Yeah.
But for the other folks, and I can use myself as an example. When I first learned about this, I put myself on a ketogenic diet. And in retrospect, I now realize that I was very insulin resistant, even though I was exercising a lot, but I would eat
Yeah.
lots and lots of fruit. And I needed to eat
Mm.
every couple of hours to keep my brain going.
Yeah.
And, after, learning about this, I started eating lower carbohydrate, higher fat, higher protein. My exercise got better. I didn't need to eat all day. I can now skip meals, no problem. That would be
Yeah.
unthinkable 5 years ago.
Mm.
Right.
I could
Yeah.
never skip a meal and work. I wouldn't
Yeah.
have made it.
And you don't need to exercise that hard either, right? Just
No,
do
no.
20 minutes HIT and like you're done for the day. Maybe lift some weights a few times a week and you're off and running, right?
It's
Like,
true. It does not. You don't need to spend hours and hours exercising, and you have so much more energy to do it if you're
yeah.
eating the right way, if you're fueling your body the right way.
That
Yeah.
all sounds good.
Yeah.
How are your kids doing?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So, I mean, I wish I could report both are completely well. One is really completely well. He's in
Mm.
college. He's actually studying pre-med.
Nice.
And, we're so proud of him. And
Yeah.
our other one, recovered about 90% through all these different
Mhm.
interventions. And then unfortunately, he got COVID
Oh,
in, I think it was 2021. And it just set off a real
took him back.
PTSD reaction for him, and
Yeah.
all the sort of things that he went through to get well. And if it can just sort of unravel with one infection, that was just horrible for him. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
he's still struggling with that.
Yeah.
And
It's a road.
yeah,
It's a road.
so I empathize with parents. I mean, there is no easy, perfect solution that's going to work for
Exactly.
everyone. And if I could get him to do my program, I would be doing it with him right alongside. But he, isn't interested so far. So I really do
Yeah.
understand that someone needs to be. They really want to get better. They have to want to get better.
Right.
They have to want to
Yeah.
do these things, and not everyone does, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes, just keep putting the suggestions out there, planting the seeds,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
actually things happen. Yeah.
That is always a lesson as a parent anyway. We do what we can, and we try to empower our kids, and it's in their time, it's in they're empowered. He has the knowledge,
Yeah.
he'll in his time when he's ready.
That's right.
But I'm sorry about
Yeah.
that setback. That's rough. And
Yeah.
I guess it's part of the learning and the growing.
We all have our journeys for sure.
Yes. Yes.
I'm afraid we're running out of time, but my
Yeah.
goodness, this has been so inspiring, and I'm so
So
excited for people
interesting.
to learn more about this. I know for me, it was one thing to be studying exercise physiology and working in medicine, thinking I kind of knew everything, but it was in that pain and going through what I went through that I now understand that it is now my purpose to be able to share this stuff. No different from you making this huge shift from psychiatry and and medicating people to do this because your purpose was your children, and it inspires people to do new things. So, wow, like I'm hoping you're going to come back and share more
Yeah.
stories about your progress because this is amazing stuff.
And more tips and ways to help people.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about sure how people can find you, how can learn more about this. If people are interested in your program, your residential program, where should they look?
Well, first of all, I would love to come back. And yeah, so the program is called Accord, and the website is www.accordmh.com. So the MH stands for mental health. So accordmh.com. So people can learn about the program there and learn a lot about metabolic psychiatry there.
Mhm.
And I'm on LinkedIn, so if anyone wants to find me specifically, I'm not on a lot of other social media individually, but I am on LinkedIn. So if someone wants to reach out to me directly, they can do so there. And yeah, I mean, as you guys were talking about stories again, I just, reminded me of this idea that, through trauma comes creativity if one
Yes.
can work through the trauma. And
Yeah.
Yes.
that's such a lesson, and when people are going through trauma, they don't necessarily want to hear that, but it's
No.
really true. And you see it all the time. I see it in my patients, my clients, and people that I know all the time as well, that, if you can find your way through the most difficult times, you
Yes.
created something new.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
Wow. Wow. Kudos
Thank
to
you, Dr.
you. Thank you
Bernstein.
so much. This has been awesome.
thank you.
Yes.
And now for your core mental health break. This is your opportunity to take a moment to support your mental wellness, your peace of mind, your own ease and grace. Take some time every day to support your mental health. You deserve it, and it matters.
Today's journaling prompt is I am. It's open intentionally. So you can fill in whatever comes to you after the words I am. Just start writing and see what happens. Enjoy.
Thanks for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast, which is a production of our nonprofit, Cour Experience, who also creates and distributes Cour tools. You can find us at courexperience.org. Make sure you join us next week for another informative conversation to help you and your family show up mindfully, purposefully, and joyfully with each other and in your community.
Our Core Tools platform consists of a number of proven tools and techniques that are designed to reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm in spite of what's going on in your world. We want to thank Samuel Hale, LLC, for sponsoring this podcast. Technical and marketing support comes from Inspire Your Brand. Our podcast editor is Justin Beeden. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, the producers, or the financial supporters. I'm Debbie DiManno.
And I'm Marci Mitchell. Thanks for listening. If you resonate with the idea of creating a community to help support kids and families, won't you join us by following the podcast and sharing this episode? You can even write a review. It truly does take a village, and we appreciate you.